Jesse Ryland bled to protect that town, then woke up in chains while they argued whether to hang him or thank him. Dust swirled around Jesse Ryland's worn boots as he leaned against the hitching post. He wasn't the same man who'd ridden into this territory years ago, a shadow in a gang of ruthless outlaws. Back then, the only thing Jesse cared about was the glint of gold and the thrill of the chase. Now the gold seemed dull and the chase left him empty. He'd left that life behind, shedding his old skin like a snake. He'd even tried his hand at honest work, mucking stables and hauling timber. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean, or at least cleaner than robbing stagecoaches. The problem was, folks didn't forget. They saw the brand on his soul, the mark of the outlaw he used to be. Jesse ran a hand through his sandy hair, the wind whipping it across his face. He glanced at the setting sun, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Maybe he could truly start over. Maybe he could find a place where his past didn't define his future. This little town, dusty and forgotten, might be his last chance. He just needed to prove he was more than just Jesse Ryland, the outlaw. He needed to become someone else entirely. The town of Redemption Gulch clung to the side of the mountain like a stubborn weed. One dusty main street, a scattering of wooden buildings, and the ever-present clang of pickaxes against rock, that was it. Most folks wouldn't give it a second glance, but beneath the surface, Redemption Gulch held a secret. The mine, though dwindling, still yielded veins of rich, yellow gold. The townsfolk were a hardy bunch, weathered by sun and hardship. They trusted few and worked hard for every penny. Their eyes, though often kind, held a glint of suspicion, especially toward strangers. They remembered the boomtown days, the swindlers and claim jumpers who'd come and gone like vultures. They were wary of anyone who wasn't born and bred in the gulch. The gold they pulled from the earth wasn't just money, it was their future, their children's future. It was a reason to keep going, to keep fighting against the odds. It was also a target, a beacon in the wilderness that drew unwanted attention, the kind that could bring darkness to their doorstep. They knew, deep down, that their little secret wouldn't stay hidden forever. The whispers started subtly, like the rustling of leaves before a storm. A lone traveler passing through spoke of a gang terrorizing settlements further north, leaving nothing but ashes and sorrow in their wake. Another claimed to have seen riders with cruel eyes and black bandanas heading south. The rumors, carried on the wind, found fertile ground in the townsfolk's existing fears. Old Man Hemlock, who ran the general store, swore he'd seen buzzards circling high above, a bad omen if ever there was one. Sarah, the schoolteacher, tried to reassure her students, but her voice trembled slightly. Even Jebediah, the grizzled sheriff, seemed more on edge than usual, his hand never far from his holstered revolver. Jesse heard the talk, too. He knew the kind of men these gangs attracted, desperate souls, hungry for power and riches with nothing to lose. He also knew that Redemption Gulch, with its hidden gold and vulnerable population, was exactly the kind of target they craved. A sense of unease settled in his stomach, a feeling he hadn't felt since his outlaw days. The storm was coming, and Redemption Gulch was directly in its path. The attack came at dawn, shattering the morning calm with the thunder of hooves and the crack of gunfire. Men in black bandanas, their faces grim and determined, poured into Redemption Gulch, firing indiscriminately. The townsfolk, caught completely off guard, scrambled for cover. Women screamed, children cried, and the air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder. Jebediah, the sheriff, stood his ground, firing back with steely resolve, but he was quickly overwhelmed. The raiders stormed the general store, looting its meager supplies. They ransacked homes, searching for the town's hidden gold. Fear turned to desperation as the townsfolk realized the full extent of the gang's brutality. Sarah, the schoolteacher, huddled with her students in the cellar praying for a miracle. Old Man Hemlock barricaded himself inside his store, clutching a rusty shotgun. The miners, hearing the commotion, rushed from the mine, their pickaxes their only weapons. Redemption Gulch had become a battleground, and the odds were stacked heavily against its defenders. Survival was the only thing on their minds. Jesse watched the chaos unfold from the shadows of the saloon. A part of him, the old outlaw, whispered to stay hidden to let the town fend for itself. They hadn't exactly welcomed him with open arms. But another part, a part he thought he'd buried long ago, stirred within him. He saw the fear in Sarah's eyes as she ushered her students to safety. He saw Jebediah, outnumbered but unbowed, fighting to protect his town. He couldn't stand by and watch. He strode out of the saloon, his hand instinctively reaching for the Colt peacemaker he'd kept hidden beneath his coat. It felt strangely familiar, a tool of his past that he now intended to use for good. The outlaw skills he'd honed over years of raiding and robbing, his quick draw, his sharp aim, his tactical mind, could be used to protect, not destroy. This wasn't about gold or glory. It was about doing what was right, even if it meant risking everything. It was about finally shedding the label of outlaw and becoming something more. Jesse Ryland, the defender of Redemption Gulch, was about to be born. He took a deep breath and stepped into the fray. Jesse moved like a ghost, a phantom from his past. He took down 2 raiders with well-aimed shots before they even knew he was there. He used the alleyways and rooftops to his advantage, appearing and disappearing like a desert mirage. His knowledge of outlaw tactics proved invaluable. "Get to cover, use the buildings," he yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos. He directed the miners, showing them how to use their pickaxes as makeshift weapons, how to create barricades with overturned wagons. He rallied the frightened townsfolk, instilling in them a newfound sense of hope and purpose. He saw a group of raiders trying to flank the saloon, where Sarah and the children were hiding. With a burst of speed, he intercepted them, engaging them in a furious gunfight. Bullets whizzed past his head, but he remained focused, his movements precise and deadly. One by one, the raiders fell, their attack thwarted by Jesse's bravery and skill. The tide of the battle began to turn. The townsfolk, emboldened by Jesse's leadership, fought with renewed vigor. Redemption Gulch was fighting back. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows over the ravaged town. The fighting had subsided, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Buildings were scarred with bullet holes, and the ground was littered with debris. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and blood. The raiders, their attack repelled, lay scattered throughout the town, defeated but not forgotten. The townsfolk, battered and bruised, emerged from their hiding places, surveying the damage. They had survived, but at a cost. Old Man Hemlock lay dead behind the counter of his store, a victim of a stray bullet. Several miners were wounded, their faces etched with pain. Sarah, though safe, clutched her students tightly, her eyes filled with a lingering fear. Redemption Gulch had won the battle, but the victory was bittersweet. They had lost friends, neighbors, and a piece of their innocence. The scars of the raid would run deep, a constant reminder of the day their peaceful existence was shattered. Even in victory, there was sorrow. Jesse stood amidst the wreckage, his clothes torn and stained with blood, both his and the raiders. He expected gratitude, a pat on the back, maybe even a word of thanks. He'd saved their town, risked his life for them, but what he received was far from it. Jebediah, his face grim, approached him, followed by a group of armed townsfolk. "Jesse Ryland," he said, his voice devoid of warmth, "you're under arrest." "What?" Jesse asked, disbelief washing over him. "For what?" "For your past," Jebediah replied, his eyes unwavering. "We know who you are, what you've done. Saving us doesn't erase that." The townsfolk closed in, their faces a mixture of fear and resentment. They remembered the rumors, the stories of Jesse Ryland, the notorious outlaw. They couldn't forget, couldn't forgive. They saw him not as a savior, but as a criminal who had simply stumbled into doing the right thing. Jesse didn't resist as they disarmed him and led him to the town's small, dilapidated jail. He felt a cold emptiness in his chest, a crushing disappointment. He had finally tried to do good, and this was how he was repaid. He was still Jesse Ryland, the outlaw, no matter what he did. The jail cell was small and cramped, the air thick with the stench of stale sweat and despair. Jesse sat on the rickety cot, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger simmered beneath the surface, a burning resentment towards the townsfolk who had so readily condemned him. They had used him, exploited his skills, and then discarded him like a broken tool. Disappointment weighed heavily on his heart. He had dared to hope, dared to believe that he could escape his past, that he could earn their respect. But he had been wrong. The stain of his outlaw days was permanent, indelible. A tempting thought crept into his mind: let them suffer. Let the next wave of raiders come and take what they wanted. Let them experience the same fear and desperation he had witnessed. They deserved it. They had sown the seeds of their own destruction, but even as he entertained the idea, a flicker of doubt remained. Could he truly abandon them, knowing what was coming? Could he stand by and watch innocent people suffer even after their betrayal? The internal battle raged within him, tearing him apart. The decision he faced would define who he truly was. The unsettling quiet that had settled over Redemption Gulch was shattered once more, this time by a single, menacing rider. He rode a black stallion, his face hidden beneath the brim of a wide-brimmed hat. Even from a distance, Jesse could sense the raw power and cruelty radiating from him. Word spread like wildfire. It was Silas Blackwood, the leader of the defeated gang, a man known for his ruthlessness and brutality. He was said to be even more dangerous than his men, a cold-blooded killer who wouldn't hesitate to wipe Redemption Gulch off the map. Silas dismounted in front of the saloon, his eyes scanning the town with cold indifference. He spoke with a voice that dripped with menace, promising retribution for the deaths of his men. He gave the townsfolk an ultimatum: hand over their gold and their weapons or face the consequences. The air crackled with tension. The townsfolk, already weakened and demoralized, were now facing an even greater threat. Their fragile victory had turned into a looming nightmare. The silence in the jail cell was broken by the shuffling of feet and the sound of hesitant voices. Jebediah, his face etched with worry, stood before the bars, followed by Sarah and a few other townsfolk. Their eyes, once filled with suspicion, now held a desperate plea. "Jesse," Jebediah began, his voice low, "we need your help." Jesse remained silent, his expression unreadable. Sarah stepped forward. "We were wrong, Jesse. We judged you unfairly. We were scared and we made a mistake." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Please, you're the only one who can save us." The other townsfolk murmured in agreement, their faces contrite. They had realized the gravity of their situation. They had pushed away the one person who could protect them, blinded by their prejudice. Now, facing an even greater evil, they had nowhere else to turn. "Blackwood," Jebediah continued, "he's not like the others. He'll destroy everything. We can't fight him alone." Jesse listened, his heart unmoved. He had wanted their respect, their acceptance, but not like this, not out of desperation. He knew they didn't deserve his help, but could he truly turn his back on them, knowing what Blackwood was capable of? The weight of their plea pressed down on him, forcing him to confront his own conscience. Jesse looked at their pleading faces, the genuine fear in their eyes. He thought about Old Man Hemlock, about Sarah's students, about all the innocent people who would suffer if Blackwood had his way. He couldn't let that happen, no matter how much they had wronged him. "I'll help," he said, his voice firm, "but on my terms." Jebediah nodded eagerly. "Anything, Jesse, just name it." "First," Jesse said, "you release me. Not just to fight, but for good. My past is over. I'm a free man." The townsfolk exchanged nervous glances. It was a big ask, a complete reversal of their previous decision. "And second," Jesse continued, "you listen to me. You follow my plan, no questions, no arguments." He wasn't doing this for their gratitude. He was doing it for himself, to prove that he was more than just an outlaw, to finally earn the redemption he craved. This was his chance to truly shed his past and embrace a new future. He would save Redemption Gulch, not for them, but for himself. This was the only way he could truly be free. "We agree," Jebediah said, his voice filled with newfound hope. "We trust you, Jesse." With his freedom secured, Jesse wasted no time. He gathered the townsfolk in the saloon, his mind already racing, piecing together a plan. He knew Blackwood wouldn't be expecting a fight, not after the beating his men had taken. He would be arrogant, overconfident. That was their advantage. "He'll expect us to cower," Jesse said, his voice commanding. "He'll expect us to hand over the gold. We're going to give him something else entirely." He used his knowledge of the town, the narrow alleyways, the hidden passages, the abandoned mine shafts, to create a series of traps and ambushes. He knew how Blackwood's mind worked, the tactics he would employ. He anticipated his every move. He divided the townsfolk into groups, assigning each a specific task. Some would act as decoys, drawing Blackwood and his men into the traps. Others would provide cover fire from the rooftops, and a select few, the best shots, would target Blackwood himself. He emphasized the importance of surprise and coordination. They had to work together as one unit if they wanted to stand a chance. He was no longer an outlaw, and they were no longer just townsfolk. They were a team united by a common goal, to protect their home and their future. Blackwood and his remaining men rode into Redemption Gulch, expecting an easy victory. They were met with silence, an eerie calm that unsettled even the most hardened outlaws. Then the trap sprung. Explosions rocked the town as hidden charges detonated, sending debris flying. Townsfolk opened fire from the rooftops, picking off Blackwood's men one by one. Decoys lured the remaining gang members into the narrow alleyways, where they were ambushed by miners wielding pickaxes and shotguns. Blackwood, enraged, fought his way through the chaos, his eyes searching for Jesse. He found him in the center of town, standing alone, waiting for him. The two men faced each other, the embodiment of good and evil, redemption and damnation. A fierce gunfight erupted. Jesse and Blackwood exchanged shots, their bullets finding their mark on the surrounding buildings. Jesse, using his superior knowledge of the town, gained the upper hand, forcing Blackwood to retreat into the abandoned mine. He followed, determined to end this once and for all. The final showdown had begun. The mine was a labyrinth of dark tunnels and treacherous pitfalls. Jesse and Blackwood stalked each other through the darkness, their footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. Blackwood, driven by rage and desperation, fought with savage intensity, but Jesse, fueled by a desire for redemption, was more determined. He used his knowledge of the mine to his advantage, leading Blackwood into a dead end. In a final, desperate struggle, Jesse disarmed Blackwood and stood over him, his gun pointed at his head. He could have killed him, ended it all right there. But he hesitated. He wasn't an outlaw anymore. Instead, he lowered his weapon. "It's over, Blackwood," he said, his voice steady. "You're finished." The townsfolk emerged from the mine, their faces filled with relief and gratitude. They had witnessed Jesse's bravery, his skill, and his compassion. They finally saw him for who he truly was, not an outlaw but a hero. They offered him their thanks, their respect, their acceptance. Jesse had earned his redemption. He had found a new purpose in defending the innocent, in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. He was no longer running from his past. He was building a future in Redemption Gulch, a place he could finally call home.